Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Adi with Lieutenant General Vinod Bhatia, somebody who I literally rely on when it comes to India-China relations on the border, diplomatically, and on an overall sort of a setting. Firstly, sir, hello and welcome to the show. I know you're an outstation. It's my honor to actually have you, and you literally saying yes to this particular talk, even when you're not in your base. So, thank you so much for joining in, sir, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adi. It's always a pleasure and education learning experience being on your show, and Dev Talk especially. And
Thank
thanks
you,
to
sir.
all your viewers; they give you so much of support, and it's a very, I must say, it's a very niche sort of viewership you have. So always very interesting to be on your show.
Thank you, sir. Sir, let's talk little politics. Then we'll get into geopolitics, and then we'll get into the military. So three parts of this discussion. Politics may, what I want to ask you is, interestingly, BRICS is the next big political event where India and China again will come face to face with Modi and Xi Jinping kind of meeting up or probably shaking hands or whatever will happen there. Two parts of my questions are: one, there was a narrative that was run across by a lot of the Western media, economists and this and that put out these things. Oh, India, China have kind of broken ice and all that stuff that had been put out. And then the second version is also the factor that initially Prime Minister Modi was not planning to go to BRICS. And this was again reported by the Western media, but similar feelings were coming out of China as well. 2 days ago, when we see Prime Minister Modi going to the BRICS, today morning the Chinese president has also accepted that he's going. What's happening here, sir? Is this like a showmanship sort of a thing between both the countries in these international forums?
Not really. It's being made a showmanship. I don't think there's much showmanship involved because both Mr. Modi and Xi Jinping are, you know, a leader of two great countries. Actually, if you look at it, two very large countries, and we are neighbors in a way. We share a boundary which is not historical, but which is the pragmatic boundary, 348 kilometers boundary, and we are the Asian giants. I think India and China. Uh, have a lot to a lot in common.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, China did not understand India, and not that India understands China too much. And I think Xi Jinping went very wrong uh, after taking over in 2013 March till up to started off with the Dep Sung in 2013 April, then came Chumar in 2014 coinciding with the visit. Then we see Doklam happening, and then of course the final thing in the forward deployment in April of 2020. So I think it was a Himalayan blunder from the Chinese side. That's how I'll put it. Himalayan blunder. Because now we see more and more China needs India more and more. It's not
Hmm.
so. So why should India shy away from it? I think Mr. Modi is a statesman. He's doing very well to go out and we have behaved in a very we have shown our resolve, strategic resolve, and we have been very responsible in our actions and reactions both. And I think we should not shy away just because Xi Jinping is coming for breaks or something. We should go ahead. We should look after India's interests. And Xi Jinping, if I see him now, I think he would like to correct the mistake, but how does he do it? He doesn't know because space is very important for the Chinese, right? So the Chinese are a country actually, and they did not expect an Indian Indian resolve and an Indian sort of, I would not say retaliation, uh, but uh, but the response which India gave, and so that was a very good one. Of course, it remains unresolved. We have a long way to go. It is not making much progress. But I think the leaders meeting in BRICS summit and thereafter followed by G20 also. Let's see how it pans out. Uh, let there be positivity. I think China would understand that today China stands alone, and India has a lot of support from all over the world, be it the USA, be it the Western nations, be it the global South. We are respected and we are well regarded for our honesty.
That's no these things. I think you brought about something very important because when you read the Chinese initial statements that came out of during the OBOR or BRI initiative, they had placed India as the center of their entire policy, and that actually center went off. So it kind of it's quite funny that the Chinese find themselves in that situation where You created a investment pattern with keeping one country in the center, and you kind of went and fought with it. Uh, where do you
You know,
see the
may I add, see, India is the
absolutely?
only country which overtly opposed the BRI. Only country. Others did, attend by various, in the first BRI or OBO conference, and their meeting was even attended by all of the countries, maybe at some level, junior levels or senior levels or mid levels. But India vehemently opposed that BRI, and rightly so, because the BRI runs through our sovereign territory, and
Absolutely.
without India, the BRI is not progress because India is not there.
That's the whole thing. I mean, it's so funny that the Chinese literally place their economic future on a country. Ki bhai, we will coordinate and cooperate with this particular country, and this is the whole thing. So another question is, of course, the world opinion about China is actually degrading quite a bit. uh, they used to rely on their relationships with the West and rely on relationships with the EU and stuff like that to kind of counter regional imbalances. Today, we don't find that, and we find the factor that all the countries that the Chinese used to rely on have actually put India as the center of their geopolitical effort in terms of the Indo-Pacific. Even the Germans, which are supposed to be quite quiet in these kind of things, have come out and put out an Indo-Pacific policy. A lot of people criticize it because the India name is not there too many times. But the sheer fact that it's an Indo Pacific policy, need I say more? How do you see this playing out between the relations of both the countries, sir?
Basically, India and Germany, or India and
No,
China, both.
India and China. So, how do you see this
Yeah,
whole,
right.
degrading of the Western relations in China and India becoming kind of the center?
Yeah, I think nations don't trust China, and China has not been, very good at creating trust and friendships. Right? It'll invest monies, it'll do a number of things, but they're so anti of that nation. They don't respect that nation. They don't respect the people actually. The people need respect, and they promise big. They promise jobs and all, but then in the end, all the economic outcomes and fallouts, and they go to the Chinese companies. Look at Sri Lanka example, Maldives another example. Look at the African countries. They are actually going and investing and taking out more than the investments. So in the end, the people do not see the benefits coming out of it. So there's a lack of trust in the Chinese, and India is on the other end. India, we go and invest in people. We not invest in governments. We invest in people.
Mm.
Be it Afghanistan, be it any of our neighbors or extended neighborhood or Africa. We invest in the people. The ITech programs have got their own beneficiaries. There's so many students who are studying in India, are doctors. Even in the US, if you look at it, every sixth American is being treated by Indian doctor. Okay. So that is, whatever power you call it, I don't see power, but that is the trust which people have in India today. India is a growing power. It's a growing nation. It's growth. Well, we already grown actually. We have reached that stage of the world, whereas China has not. So that is why you see nations like Germany and even Australia, France, even other nations. Japan, for Japan's neighbors, your enemy, neighbors, your enemy, neighbors, your friend. But the fact is that Southeast Asia, you look at all the countries, uh, they are first pro themselves, second they're pro India. But having said that, let me also give a word of caution. When it comes to their interests, uh, they will not thereafter, if they trust directly with China, I think they will go with China because China still continues to be a manufacturing hub, an economic giant, and we have a long way to cover up on that. We should understand that, and we should not in a hurry to compete with China as yet. Our competition and economic, after all, economic geopolitics are interlinked. Geoeconomics and geopolitics, and I would even say geotechnology, are interlinked, right? While we are making rapid progress, we still got some ground to cover. And let us learn from the Chinese. When the Chinese said, uh, "Bide your time, hide your strengths," we may not hide our strength, but let's bide our time. And we are growing at a rate. Our economy is growing, and economy covers everything, and technology also. Now we are getting into it. Military, our military is growing. We're getting into transformations in a big way. So we should bide our time. and geopolitically strengthen our position in the world order.
It's interesting when you say this, because it's today India-China relations have no longer been remained bilateral, and that's something that the Chinese used to do earlier in history. They always pegged you against the US, then they pegged you against the Soviet Union, then they pegged you back against the US, then they pegged you regionally with Pakistan, and now they're pegging you back with the US. The reason I asked this, sort of this thing, is because they always look at it as a multilateral relation. We will be not coordinating with India because you are very close to excuse me, the USA. How do you see this particular aspect playing out between both the countries, considering BRICS is not a US dominated forum? SEO isn't. And
BRICS isn't, SU isn't. There's so many other forums. IPSA isn't. So and wherever you find uh, India that way is a part of most of the critical important forums, right? Including the your Quad, and if you look at BRICS, and why not RIC? RIC was a big forum, of course. I thought RIC would grow, but it didn't grow because of certain factors. But you're absolutely right. Today, India is accepted in all quarters actually, and that is a fact which worries China. China's strategic aim of containment of India, is likely to pull down China, and India has to outgrow that containment of China. So that is where the challenge lies. It is not a zero-sum game. I think I always felt, and I always said so before 2020, that India and China have to grow together. Actually, if you look at our voting patterns in the UN General Assembly, you'll find that there is congruence of interests. You find our voting patterns in critical issues like climate and all. You'll find that we have congruence of interests. But having congruence of interests, China feels threatened by a growing India, and it contains India. That is why today India is at the center of most multilaterals that, like you rightly pointed out, whether it is the BRICS or it's SU, of course, we are there, G20 for the matter. So that way, I think we should now see India not as anti-China, but India as a pro-India. Something is on your channel. I've always said so. So let our growth not be retarded by too much focus on China. We should be aware of China. We should meet and mitigate the threats emanating out of China, but at the same time, we should create counterbalances to make sure that China does not do anything more than what it's already done. And that comes out of strength, and we need to build strength. And we've got to build strength in the political field, in the geopolitical field, in the diplomatic field, in the military and economic field, and information also.
so when we see the writings within China, and this is now I'm going to go to the multilateral relation, bilateral relations between the Chinese and India. We see writers within the CICIR, the China Institute of International Studies, and the Shanghai Institute of Studies. I've been reading a lot of their blogs and their research and all that stuff. Uh, the basic sense that comes out of these blogs, and I've covered it in multiple different videos in my own channel. One major sense that I see is that they are worried about the two front threat that India is giving them today, and they don't know how to react. Now there is a section of people that says, yeah, talk to India softly, let's try and cooperate, let's try and coordinate, we need to push this back because we're going to have trouble otherwise. The second segment, which I think is a dominant segment within China, which is the stronger ones like Xi Jinping himself, talk about the struggle, and struggle equals dandabazi and all that in their particular language. Does this tell you that they're not yet sure how to handle this, the growing India today? Because it sure does give me a sense that they're not very understanding, and they're not able to understand the game between the two countries, and they do seem very nervous. Your opinion?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I also have the same. I also read the situation in a similar fashion. That's why I use the word Himalayan blunder by China. Right. So why? And that is a very deliberate thing which I say Himalayan blunder by China, because they have not only bitten more than they can chew, but they have failed to comprehend what the world is moving to. Right? They did not expect that. They thought, a benign India would just, lie low and nothing would happen, and they would do what they wanted to do, which has not really happened. And India has been stronger because of that. uh, China has weakened, India is stronger, and China now realizes that it doesn't. You call it China's multi-front threats. Actually, it's not.
Hmm.
Taiwan is only one of them. India is only one of them. But they're also looking at a threat in the South China Sea. They also should look at a threat at East Sea, which they call the East China Sea, which I call the East Sea. Actually, the Japanese don't like being called that being called the East China Sea. It's the East Sea actually, right?
Hmm.
So China also looks at at a multi-front threat right now, and that is why you find that China has realized at some point of time that it may be better to improve relations in India, and that is the feeling which is the feelers which come out of Beijing. That let us improve our relations. Let not the LAC be the relation driven by the LAC. But our stance is status quo ante, and thereafter we can think of normalized relations. So that is where I think the confrontation, the conflict, the contradictions are, and they will continue to. And we'll have to see who blinks. I don't think India is going to blink because politically
Hmm.
India and China would need a face saver actually. Let's see in the next, by end of the year, I think it'll be more crystal clear as to where China is heading, because with all these multilateral meetings coming up, if the leaders meet and they give us strategic guidance as they done earlier in Wuhan, what are the implications thereof? In the next meeting, will it just be a hi hello, or it'll be more than that? We're not sure. Will there be will side meetings between the two leaders? There is because you see, if the political level meetings have always been there between the Raksha Mantri and the Defense Minister, the Foreign Ministers, the NSAs, the Special Representatives, even the WMCC, which is the working mechanism for cooperation and coordination, China, that is meeting. It's not that not meeting. The co-commanders have been meeting. It's only the heads of states are not met, other than the Indonesia and Bali in 2020. So I see that China will have to be very crafty in what it wants to do. It has got internal issues actually. Something we talk about now, and their internal dynamics. Xi Jinping is his third term, which everyone knew that's going to happen, but it is not really as per the norm. And there's corruption continues. There's purging at the upper level. The economy is down, so it'll have to look at both internal and external. Uh, and India as the plus one option for the economic development, for for the FDIs to come in, for foreign investors to come in. So we are seeing this sort of a transition which is going on. And how we manage the transition, how China manages the transition in the world geopolitics would be a good way forward for us.
It's honestly, it's such a simple thing to understand, sir. I mean, we are talking about it in such a simple manner. This is not complicated English. We're not talking about major things. This is something so simple, and which actually tells you the we are not worried about engaging with China right now. But and I'm not saying this because I'm an Indian. I would look at it dispassionately when I say this, that I do feel that they're a little worried about engagements with India, and they do worry about the factor that India should not overshadow them in multilateral organizations. Would you agree with me, sir?
Yeah, definitely. That's what I said. They want to contain India. Why they want to contain India is because they feel a latent Indian threat. India is as a growing nation. That is why you feel that it is always they try to come two steps forward and then take a step back.
Hmm.
Whether it's results of Arunachal, Arunachal Pradesh, whether it is the media being shunted out from both countries. So, India also now showing its political heft and economic heft by banning a number of Chinese companies and Chinese investments.
Yep.
A number that we said no, we don't want you. Whether it is a big investment we're talking about.
Hmm.
So that is, and No, very big investment we're talking about, and we said no. We are scrutinizing the Chinese investment in the companies, and rightly so. So we are actually showing China there that we are not like other nations where you go and invest monies and you take over things. It's not what happened. There's the Pakistan example now. Pakistan is suffering because of Chinese investments. Sri Lanka has already suffered because of the Chinese investments. The other nations who has. So that is something which you are absolutely right. But then China is China, and that is where we have to be, very careful in what the signals that emanate from China. Don't read it to the face value. See the deep meanings behind it. Adversaries are adversaries. Never underestimate them. Never underestimate adversity. China's adversity. Let's face facts. So as a military man, I'd say I'm talking adversity, right? So there are adverse relationships also with China, and let us not underestimate them, and let us be more pragmatic about the whole thing, and let us grow our sense and look at China. Whenever they do something, it should be given back in equal measure. Okay, and that is the language China understands. Whatever they do, in a proportionately equal measure, has to be given back to China. Whether it's a political level, whether it is at the economic level, at the commerce level, whether it is one-to-one relationship, whether it's sportsmanship, anything. They were so worried about the 2008 Beijing Olympics, the example, and they were so worried that the Tibetans would, when the Olympic torch was coming to India, they're so worried that Tibetans may do something, right? And we supported them. This is what they did to us. They have to understand that there are fissures within China. The fissures within India also now.
The interesting thing is Chinese consider themselves to be a higher being, as something which I would say Chinese, the CCP consider themselves to be a higher being. We are better than everyone and all that stuff. So talking about, coming to the military part of it, of course, this should have been the campaign season, sir. Correct me if I'm wrong. Uh, in Ladakh, this is a good time to do something. Even in the east, it's a good time to do something. The weather is nice. There's not much rains at this time. Things are pretty okay. I mean, I personally, and I'm going to put my neck out there and said that I expected something of the sort to happen on the border before the G20 kind of summit happens in September, because that's the way Chinese like to put somebody under pressure. As of now, Xi Jinping's attendance is not really sure, so anything could happen even tomorrow, tonight, or whenever. How do you see the situation on the border, sir? Would they kind of risk these little pinpricks that they keep on doing, or do you think it's gonna go into a sort of a freeze as we go forward in time, sir?
No, historically, if you look at the events, and I can give you events from the 80s onwards,
Hmm.
whenever there's a high-profile visit, either side, by a Chinese high-profile visit to India or an Indian high-profile visit to China, it's been an odd occasion when China has not, I would say that let me use a military language. China has not done something uh, along the LAC, right?
Hmm.
That is the political pressure which India comes with. India is a democratic country. China can hide anything and everything. It controls the media, it controls the social media, it controls everything, right? In India, it is not so. Even a small thing can blow up. And that is why I feel that China will definitely, try and do something. Uh, but then, as we know that China will try and do something, we are also fully prepared. If you look at any event for that matter, including Xi Jinping's visit in September 2014, in May of 2013, the first visit of their Prime Minister LK. And before that, I can go on and on. Actually, there are examples wherever a
Yeah, yeah.
president or a prime minister visiting other side, you find they will do something on the LAC along the LAC. It's standard operating procedure for them. So I see. So we are prepared actually. I think the only time they did not do anything was when Prime Minister Manmohan Singh visited China on 23rd, 24th October 2013. I was a DGM. We were fully prepared for something. It didn't happen, which is quite a surprise actually, because that time we signed it was the BCDA was signed, the border defense
Yeah,
BDCA was signed, border defense
yeah.
forward agreement in October 2013, right? So we are fully prepared. It'll happen. We also fully prepared. So let them do it. if they want to do it. Uh, They should know now that they cannot get away with it. There are cost and consequences to what they do. You see that the December 2022 Yangtze uh, face off, right? They had to make a retreat. So but if they do it, then we're prepared. Militarily, we are prepared. Politically, we are prepared. And I hope they don't do it, because but that is not maturity of a nation. It is not maturity. Or responsible nations don't do such things. They're very much part of the G20. And if India is, getting showing its political clout in the world order in the G20, so be it. Why should China feel threatened by India? I don't understand that. But China does feel threatened by India.
Yeah,
And because it feels threatened, it threatens India. And that makes us even stronger, actually. I feel it makes us stronger. I thank China for what it did in April of 2020.
absolutely,
I
absolutely, sir.
we thankful to them. They woke us up. Look, today if we have grown in the last 3 years, it is because of what China did to us. Militarily, we are better. Economically, now we are growing up, and despite the pandemic, which is again made in China pandemic, we are doing much better.
That is true, sir. As a matter of fact, this was quite a revelation to me when it was told to me for the first time by General Kamath. He said, I thank China. I said, yeah, this is an interesting perspective, I must say. It was years ago he actually said this.
I
And
was I said so in June of 2020 when Galwan happened.
yeah, so see,
When
this is
Galwan
something
happened,
that we need to understand.
huh?
We all say China thinks 50 years ahead and all that stuff. Did they?
No, that China may think that they think ahead, but then, like I said, overconfidence also never understood the adversary. That's what they did.
Most importantly, I think that is a bottom line point that you've said for this particular show, sir. I must say that's actually a very important thing. So going forward, look at the Chinese islands. If no, I'll call it an island for the heck of my question. If you see the Chinese island today, uh, let's start from the northeast. You've got South Korea, you've got Japan going down. You've got these chain of islands, which is Okinawa, Guam, Taiwan, which is like an unsinkable aircraft carrier. Going towards the east, you're going towards the west, you've got Vietnam, which is something that the Chinese are scared of. South of that, you've got this Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia belt. Philippines is again hardcore US presence. Malaysia is US presence. The French are roaming around there. The British are roaming around there. The guy wants to come out into the Indian Ocean. He said, "Chalo, Gwadar mein kuch karta hu." We are sitting there. He said, "Chalo, Myanmar se kuch karta hu." We are sitting there. Now he's saying, "I'll go through Iran and come down into the Persian Gulf." He meets the CENTCOM right there. What's happened, sir? Has he not understood that he's been hemmed in? In the time of crisis, he's blocked. How do you think, one, does he understand it, and two, what is his reaction going to be?
No, no, I agree with you totally. It's a containment of China. It is. I don't think more. It is isolation of China, actually, and China is responsible for the isolation. It's not so. If you look at the US has got a couple of battleships, battle groups just outside the South China Sea,
Correct, sir.
right? And it's got the bases all over, like you rightly pointed out. And China is also now getting into bases. Like, it's not China is not getting, not that it's easy to isolate China. China also got bases, right? It is also a growing navy. It is the largest navy in the world. It's a larger navy than the US. Of course, it may not have the same naval power, but in qualitative terms, but in quantitative terms, it's larger than the US navy. So China has understood that isolation of China, because it has not been friendly to any nations for that matter. Not very many nations. Its neighbors. It's got 27 neighbors, right? 14 neighbors with land boundaries, another 13 neighbors with maritime boundaries. And look at that, it's got a dispute with almost each one of them. Though
Hmm.
it may have solved the boundary issue with the 12 nations, but that does not mean that it has got very good relations with all the nations, because China is China. So you are absolutely right out there. I agree with you totally. It's the isolation of China, and China is that's what it's trying to do to break the isolation by creating bases all over. The BRI was not only meant for this, but the BRI was supposed to be, China centric, and it would go and access all over. It's not succeeded.
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
It's not succeeded the way China had, planned it out, and the vision of BRI was different. Today, I think it's not achieved. It seems.
My last question to you will be a bit unrealistic, sir. Let's say that they decide, okay, fine, let's resolve this nonsense in the border, let's pull back and this and that. Uh, what is the larger motive of India today, sir? Where are we standing? Are we wanting the status quo ante, or we want a resolution to the border? Because I look at it from two different things. Resolution to the border is a plus point as it is, because you fixed it and you're okay. Status quo ante also kind of seems to be an advantage India at the end of it, because it's uh, the so-called two-front threat that the Chinese are worried about, because it's an unmarked border. That's another thing. Even the Chinese can take advantage, but so can we. So, what do you think is our game plan going forward, sir, with regards to China and the border,
See, in the immediate and short term, it is status quo ante, right?
sir?
But that's not the ultimate aim. We don't understand that these things take ages, actually decades and
Eons,
decades.
yes, sir. Mm.
So we should not get too concerned about it. As long as for the immediate we get the status quo ante. Of course, we have a resolution of 14 November 1962. It's a
Sir,
parliament resolution that we will recapture all our lost territories. Okay, that's a parliament of 14 November 1962. Right. That resolution remains, that parliament resolution. We should understand that. But the fact remains that in a growing world, we've got to be more pragmatic. And I think it will be in both in India's interest and China's interest to resolve the boundary question in the mid to long term, and resolve it amicably with what we call a mutual and equitable respect with each other for each other, and that is where the challenge will lie. And especially for India being, China would like to resolve it at its own terms. That's a problem, and India cannot let that happen. Okay, so there, especially when it talks, there, I think 21, 22 rounds of talks, or 22
yeah.
rounds of talks have already held. So a lot of work has gone. It's not the work has not gone in. After all, we would like to resolve the boundary question with China, but at our own terms, which should be mutually acceptable. If that is not mutually acceptable, then there's no resolution. We can continue with it. We are a big country. We'll continue with it. So what? But the status quo ante is the immediate aim to restart the process of peace and tranquility. It is the status quo ante, peace and tranquility. With the status quo ante should also come in what I call disengagement, de-escalation, and de-induction. Right. So it is not that status quo ante means you just go back. It'll also have to be de-escalate the whole issue and de-induct the additional troops which you have which China has inducted
Theater,
into the
yes, sir.
West along the LAC. So that is the immediate thing. And then thereafter, let us try and normalize the relationship. We are okay with it. India, like I said, always, we have never said that we want a adverse relationship with China. It is China which has always said that, you should do this. This is what it is. They're so worried about that things, even the one China policy. Yeah. The, Tibet, a lot of it will also depend on how they perceive Tibet, and they have got, like I said, internal fissures. India is very responsible in all these matters. We don't interfere with our policy is not to interfere with other nations' internal affairs. So that is what it is. So it has to be the start point has to be status quo ante. Without that, nothing can move forward.
Interesting. I think that is a this thing, and we find ourselves in a situation where the Chinese keep telling us that you're being too rigid about the whole thing. And again, this is something I'm picking up from their writings. So thank you, sir, for putting a certain perspective on this thing, because going forward, I think the engagement between India and China is going to be a little more active, and I think it'll need addressal at constant intervals, because one will have to, you know, there'll be different messages flying around the place. One will have to try and make sense of what's going to happen and what's not going to happen, because the media, if I may, does a terrible job of actually portraying the reality, and we find ourselves actually just reading a completely opposite perspective to what is happening on the ground. So thank you for helping us making sense of what's is happening, and going forward, what do you look at happening, sir? Always a pleasure talking to you and learning from you. Till next time, sir. Jai
Thank you,
Hind.
Ari. Thank you very much. Word of caution, everything that comes in the Western media cannot be right and cannot be true.
Absolutely, sir.
You have to look at China and India, China from Indian perspective, not from a Western perspective. As long as we keep looking from a Western perspective, I think we'll go wrong. Thank you very much. Always a pleasure to be on the platform. It's very intellectually stimulating. Thank you very much. Jai
Thank
Hind.
you, sir. Jai Hind, sir.